여러분, 안녕하세요. 저는 주한연구대사관의 데이비드 마키입니다. 저는 오늘 영국의 기후변화 정책과 특히 2017년의 파리 협약에 대한 실행 계획으로 발표된 청청 성장 계획에 대해서 말씀드리겠습니다. 여러분들이 제 발표를 잘 이해하시도록 지금부터 영어로 말씀드리겠습니다. So for everyone who's just scrambling for translations, I'm going to speak in English, so don't worry. So today I'm just going to lay out a little bit about climate policy in the UK, so focusing on our Climate Change Act of 2008, some of the actions we've already taken to deal with, to help implement our NDCs, such as our carbon budget and carbon price floor, a little bit about energy transition, and then look into the future, what our plans are for NDC implementation from here on in through the UK's clean growth strategy. Sorry, which one is it? So I'll try and get the slide to change. There we go. No? One more? There we go. So the UK was one of the first countries to recognise and act on climate change. The UK's policy framework on climate change is based on the Climate Change Act of 2008. Now, this is the instrument that makes it the duty of the Secretary of State to ensure that the UK hits its 2050 target of an 80% reduction in emissions against a 1990 baseline. So we were able to achieve quite an ambitious target relatively early on, as the bill had cross-party support, as well as the blessing of environmental NGOs, trade unions, and business. So there were no major mainstream dissenting voices at the time. The only real debate was about how ambitious the legislation needed to be. So the Climate Change Act introduced in the UK the concept of carbon budgets. So this mandates the UK's net carbon account in 5-year periods to drive emissions down a cost-effective pathway towards our 2050 target. So you can see a 36% reduction by 2014, a proposed 43% reduction by 2020, and so on. Now, we've already hit that 43% target for 2020 2 years early. Last year, the UK Parliament approved the 5th carbon budget, which for the period 2038 to 2032. So this should bring the UK down to a 57% reduction on 1990 emissions levels by that date. So in the UK, the Independent Committee on Climate Change monitors the UK government's progress against this target, and they can be quite critical when they feel that we're not being sufficiently ambitious. This committee is chaired by Lord Devon, former minister, and is made up of experts in the fields of climate change, science, economics, behavioural science, and business. In addition, we made it more expensive for industry to pollute. So we introduced a carbon price floor on top of the EU ETS, EU Emissions Trading Scheme carbon price. Now this had the effect of making heavily polluting industries in the UK less economically viable, encouraging them to take measures to be more environmentally friendly and driving investment towards low carbon and clean technology. Of course, this was not a popular move at the time with industry, but government had, at that time in 2009, when we first introduced the concept, had the political will and public backing to take this quite bold step. And we think it's paid off. So greenhouse gas reductions have come hand in hand in the UK with economic growth. So we have been among the most successful countries in the developed world in growing our economy while reducing our emissions. Since 1990, we have cut emissions by 43%, it's 43% now, while our economy has grown by over 2/3. This means that we have reduced emissions faster than any other G7 nation, while leading the G7 group of countries in growth in national income over this period. And this program has meant that this progress has meant that we have outperformed the target emissions reductions of our first carbon budget by 1%, and we project that we will outperform against our second and third carbon budgets as well. So that will cover the years 2013 up to 2022. And we think we'll overperform by about 4 or 5%. And our economy is expected to grow by 12% over that time. So we're trying to demonstrate that you can you can differentiate between emissions reduction and economic growth. So up to now, to date, most of our emissions reductions have come largely from the power sector. This is where we've seen most of our early success and particularly rapid change. In 2016, 47% of our electricity came from low carbon sources. So that's including renewable energy and also nuclear power. This is around double the level that we had in 2010. In fact, since this graph was produced, we've been seeing even lower levels of fossil fuel power generation. Key to this has been a shift away from coal. So UK coal use in electricity generation is down 89% since 1990, and even 28% in just 1 year between 2016 and 2017. We've announced a complete domestic phase-out of coal by 2025. And I think it was April last year that we had the first ever day without coal power generation in the UK since the Industrial Revolution in the 19th century. We're also very strict on the criteria to providing finance for unabated coal externally. And in practice, we've not supported any UK export finance to support unabated coal projects since 2002. Indeed, we negotiated a new policy in the OECD in November 2015 on how OECD export credit agencies can contribute to our goal to address climate change. So this new policy, which I think came into effect last year, places significant restrictions on the financing of coal-fired power plants by OECD export credit agencies. And over 2/3 of the coal projects receiving official credit support from participants between 2003 and 2013 would not have been eligible for such support under the new rules. We're also trying to take a bit of a political lead on coal as well. So along with Canada, we have set up the Powering Past Coal Alliance. We did this at COP23 in Bonn last year. This provides a platform for leaders in this space to associate themselves with one of the key mitigation planks for delivering the Paris Agreement. And that is coal phase out globally by 2050, and ideally in the OECD countries by 2030. We currently have 58 members, 26 countries including France, Italy, Mexico, Ethiopia, 8 subnational members including the state of California, and 24 international organisations and businesses, including BT, Storebrand, and EDF. So by signing the Powering Past Coal Alliance Declaration, each partner makes a voluntary contribution to support the phase-out of unabated coal power within a time frame compatible with the Paris Agreement. So back in the UK, by 2015, renewables were providing over 25% of the UK's energy. That's on average. So in addition, we're on track for renewables to hit the 35% generation mark by 2020-21, exceeding our original target of 30%. In 2015, for example, we had another record year of investment with over £13 billion invested into offshore wind, taking the total to £52 billion since 2010. And we remain global leaders with the largest installed offshore wind capacity in the world. So as costs for renewables fall, the UK government has scaled back support for these technologies, particularly when they can stand independently on their own 2 feet. And we have seen in the UK the price of offshore wind halve over the last 2 years. So we've made changes to feed-in tariff schemes and the renewables obligation to manage overspend and protect consumer bills. So this is what we've been doing so far, and now we are committed to building upon this success in the future. And this is why we have placed clean growth at the heart of the UK's industrial strategy. So in April this year, we submitted the Clean Growth Strategy 2017 to the UNFCCC as the UK's long-term NDC implementation strategy. The 2017 strategy is designed to deliver business and industry efficiency, improvements to our homes, low-carbon transport, a new system of future agricultural support, a reduction in public sector emissions, clean, affordable energy, and world-leading green finance capabilities. Now, I'm going to focus on a few of these areas shortly. And while I think it's probably worth mentioning that although this is a government-led plan, it was arrived at in consultation with many stakeholders across the civil society, with industry, and across the political spectrum. So this is a plan that has industry support as well in the UK. But just very briefly, in the Clean Growth Strategy, the UK sets out each sector's reduction strategy until 2030. So this graph shows how much each sector currently emits, and you can see that business and industry, transport and power are the biggest sectors, followed by homes, natural resources, and the very small public sector. So as I mentioned, we've made most of our reductions thus far in the power sector, but now we are turning our focus to delivering more reductions in both heating and transport, and in conjunction with industry. So in order to help business and industry improve their own efficiency, we've been providing support direct to business to improve their energy productivity by at least 20% by 2030. We've invested £162 million in research and innovation in energy, resource and process efficiency, including up to £20 million to encourage switching to lower carbon alternatives. And we're also supporting innovative energy technologies through investment in our Energy Entrepreneurs Fund. And on transport, we have a mission to end the sale of new conventional petrol and diesel vehicles by 2040. We're spending £1 billion to support the take-up of ultra-low emission vehicles, including helping consumers to overcome the upfront costs of buying an electric car. And we're now investing in developing one of the best electric vehicle charging networks in the world, over £80 million to support the development of that charging infrastructure. And in order to accelerate the uptake of low-emission taxis and buses, we're providing £50 million for a plug-in taxi programme, which gives taxi drivers up to £7,500 each off a new ultra-low emission vehicle taxi, alongside £14 million to deliver dedicated charging points for taxis. We're providing £100 million for a national programme support for retrofitting existing buses and providing new low-emission buses in England and in Wales. And we're also investing around over £840 million of public funds in innovation in low-carbon technologies, low-carbon transport technology and fuel, including ensuring that the UK leads the world in the design, development and manufacture of electric batteries. So we're investing £246 million in what we call the Faraday Challenge. We're also delivering trials of heavy goods vehicle platforms, which could deliver significant fuel and emission savings. Back on power, we're hoping to reduce power costs for households and businesses by implementing the Smart Systems Plan. This will help consumers to use energy more flexibly and could unlock savings of up to £40 billion by 2050. We're delivering new nuclear through investment in Hinkley Point C and progressing discussions with developers to secure a competitive price for future projects in the nuclear pipeline. And we're hoping to improve the route to market for renewable technologies such as offshore wind. We're largely doing this through providing up to £557 million for further contract for different auctions. This guarantees developers a guaranteed strike price for the energy over the duration of a contract. And the next one's planned for spring 2019. And I mentioned working with industry earlier, so we are working to develop an ambitious sector deal for offshore wind, which could result in 10 gigawatts of new capacity with the opportunity for additional development throughout the 2020s. In terms of homes, we are investing £3.6 billion to upgrade the energy efficiency of over 1 million homes in the next 10 years. And we're trying to ensure that all fuel-poor homes are more efficient by 2035. So this is working with housing associations, but also with private landlords to improve the energy performance standards of the homes that we live in. We're rolling out low carbon heating build and heat networks for new build properties, and phasing out the installation of high carbon fossil fuel heating. So we have £4.5 billion of investment to support low carbon heat technology and 184 million to develop new energy efficiency and heating technologies. As the UK leaves the European Union, we are trying to design a new system of future agricultural support, focusing on delivering better environmental outcomes, including addressing the impact of climate change more directly. So that includes establishing a new network of forests in the UK, planting up over 11 million trees, and working towards our target of zero avoidable waste by 2050 to minimise the negative environmental and carbon impact. Particularly, the recent focus in the UK has mainly been on plastic, how we can go plastic free. I mentioned innovation earlier, and it's just probably again worth pointing out that in order to achieve the clean growth that the UK wants, we need to nurture those low carbon technologies, particularly at their incubation stages, so that processes and systems are as cheap as possible. And it's only through innovation that we will see new technologies developed and the cost of existing technologies, existing clean technologies, come down. So we've announced in total an overall low carbon innovation investment of over £2.5 billion across all sectors to support this innovation. So the final thing I wanted to mention today was green finance. So green finance is the final key pillar of our clean growth strategy. Now we set up a green finance task force in the UK to recommend to government how we deliver public and private investment to meet our carbon budgets and make the City of London, help encourage the City of London as a global home of green finance. We're working with the British Standards Institute to help define this and develop a set of voluntary green and sustainable financial management standards. And we're also providing support to a new clean technology early stage investment fund. In addition, we're working with mortgage providers to try and price in the climate risk of mortgages, to develop green mortgage products that price to reduce lending risk to energy efficient homes. So, if you want more details on the clean growth strategy, which as I mentioned is our submission to the UNFCCC for NDC implementation, then you can find it at the following links, both in English and in Korean at the second link. But 지금까지 잘 들어주셔서 대단히 감사합니다. Thank you.